For more on this on again, off again, perhaps back on again summit, we're joined by Paolo von Schirach. He's the president of the Global Policy Institute, an independent research center focused on international affairs. It's interesting, this phone call, Shinzo Abe undoubtedly has concerns about Japanese interests. They're worried about short-range missiles, the Japanese prisoners being held in the DPRK, that they'll be released. Given the mercurial nature of Trump, the on-again, off-again, I'm sure he has to have some concerns that perhaps he'll strike a deal, they'll get cut out of the equation. Does he have reason to be concerned?
Mr. Abe?
Yes.
Yes, of course he does. And obviously he's got plenty of skin in the game there because he's right next door. You know, as we know from, past news, when the North Koreans have tested their missiles, they just tested them over Japan. It wouldn't be a great idea to see a missile potentially carrying a nuke at some point going across your skies. So Japan obviously has a lot at stake. And of course, as we are deeply concerned, the United States, with the successful, it seems, testing of North Korean intercontinental ballistic missiles, they're right there. A short range or a medium range missile will do in the case of both Japan and South Korea. And Abe has been, somewhat skeptical about the possibilities of having some meaningful deal with North Korea. But back to the summit, on again, off again, etc. Assume it takes place. I think the key word, as also your reporting indicates, is what do we mean by denuclearization? And when does it take place? Now, next year, in 10 years, in 15 years? All these things, I think, will be up for talks and negotiations. In the meantime, what can America offer to induce North Korea to do this? And again, let's not lose sight of the fact that once North Korea is really committed to giving up everything, the testing, the programs, the weapons, the missiles, they've got nothing. What's their leverage once that is done? So I suspect that and it would not be so incredible that they want to keep that in reserve as a promise to be delivered down the line, but not quite now, Mr. President Trump.
What about expectations, realistic expectations? You just struck on one. They're saying we want, we heard the Libya model from John Bolton and Mike Pence.
That was an
unfortunate word. Everybody admits that now, I think. That they want it gone. Obviously, as you said, the DPRK, that doesn't look so good to them. And then you've got Moon Jae-in saying he wants a peace treaty signed. It seems like everybody has these high, lofty goals. We haven't even talked about Kim Jong-un and what he wants. Are they going into this meeting with realistic expectations, do you think?
I honestly, I don't know. Of course, the whole idea, Trump will get the Nobel Prize. This is a historic breakthrough. He's going to go and have a meeting and hugs and kisses or what have you. And poof, North Korea has given up weapons and they got a just gigantic load of U.S. money to rebuild the country and everything will be fine. And indeed, there will be peace and reconciliation in the peninsula. That was a bit exaggerated, let me put it this way. So is it possible that steps can be taken at the summit or around the summit to normalize relations between the two Koreas and that sort of some incremental steps may be taken? Yes. By the way, this was done before. At some point they had this sort of joint economic area with South Korean investments and North Korea. In other words, it is possible incrementally, if there is goodwill and genuine goodwill on both sides, to start a process that may lead to normalization. And who knows, eventually reunification. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
And Soon Kim taking part in all of this. He was in the Bush administration. I mean, this is a guy who's serious, who understands the issues. And that's been kind of lacking in the past, having somebody out front who knows and understands it. Talk to me about the seriousness now of the Trump administration and perhaps Mike Pompeo guiding this process.
Well, look, I think Pompeo, who is a smart guy, there's no question about it. I think he went in and obviously he has the advantage of having been there twice and having had private talks, and we have no idea exactly what was exchanged. So I think there's probably a measure of realism there in terms of what can or cannot be done and what sort of timeline realistically can come out of this, assuming that it happens summit in Singapore or whatever other venue they may eventually decide upon. But so I think if we are realistic, we can say that it's a good thing on balance to have a dialogue with a country that we know almost nothing about really, as opposed to not having a dialogue. I think dialogue is good in principle, but what can be achieved realistically, it's a different story altogether. And I'm not sure that this idea of money for nukes, works as simply as some people here in Washington may want to believe.
Paolo von Schirach, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your analysis.